right, are we on? Hello world!
Move over, John.
All right, right here. Well, welcome to our first TWeD Talk, Tetherless World Wednesday evening educational sessions for the 2012 year. We've got a great lineup of talks this term. Check out the website at tw.rpi.edu/web/TWeD. Eric Roselle is going to kick it off today, giving us a talk, hopefully a very interactive talk on his S2S faceted browsing. S2S has been used in a number of the lab's projects to provide a really high performance and innovative interface. When we've demoed this at various fora around the world, it's really got a pretty good reaction because people are used to a particular faceted browsing model. And when we've used it in our eScience projects or our linked open government data projects such as IOGDS, the International Open Government Dataset Search, it really gives a novel interface to it. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's welcome Eric.
Thanks, everybody. So I don't need to do much of an introduction because John covered that. Today I'm going to tell you about the S2S framework. I'd like to start with a little bit of a screenshot. This is actually the search interface that we've developed using S2S for the Biological and Chemical Oceanography Data Management Office. And so it's one of our more notable examples where we've taken S2S and actually embedded it in another application. But I'll get more into that as we go along. So just as an outline, I'll give you some motivation for the project, go through a couple of the demos, talk briefly about the architecture, and then I have some really practical, basically step-by-step tutorials on how to build S2S compatible web services, how to deploy S2S, and how to do UI development. And in S2S we consider those UI pieces to be widgets. So it's basically widget development. And then I'll talk a little bit about what the future for S2S is, and then I'll take any questions. Or actually, if we want to make this more interactive, just shout things out, because if I get bored, then I'm going to start droning on, and shout things out anytime, or call me out on whatever you want. So basically, the motivation for it, it started about a year and a half ago at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. We built it as a data dashboard or basically a framework for building data dashboards for various types of oceanography data. So one of our main motivations was this concept of having reusable UI pieces. And that's one of the things that we've done. We also wanted to support heterogeneous data, because especially within oceanography, you get data from all over the place. We wanted to be able to leverage legacy web services. And so basically those two middle points was the design decision for why S2S is a web service approach as opposed to a data model approach like Exhibit 1.0 or Exhibit 2.0 was. And then also we had this goal of having customizable search interfaces. And that's something I'll get more into for future work. But basically we were thinking we wanted to use this as maybe a stepping stone for allowing data access from both experts and non-experts alike. So using the same underlying web services, you can basically have your own custom interface with either layperson terms if you're a non-expert, or your expert vocabularies in the other case. There's just a quick overview. The way S2S has three primary actors, I guess. They're probably mislabeled now that one of our major deployments is IOGDS, the International Open Government Data Search. So originally it was meant for scientists, so scientists would access the S2S user interface, and that's about it. Data managers would maintain the S2S compatible web services and also maintain their own data repository, and then web developers would be able to contribute to the UI development. So today what I'm going to talk to you about is basically give you a tutorial on how these web services are put together, and then also a tutorial on how these UI components are put together. And a lot of the innards from this top component here, the actual framework itself, I'm not really going to cover that. But I'm happy to take questions about it offline. Right. So now I'm going to actually do the demos. I think I have them, I cheated a little bit and I have them set up. Right. So just to start, I didn't mean that. Well, right. So this is the International Open Government International Dataset Catalog Search version 1.2. This uses the latest and greatest from S2S. IOGDS basically has 5 different facets: the search terms, countries, catalogs, agencies, and categories. S2S allows you to rearrange things as you wish. Of course, it resets the search when you rearrange things sometimes. And, you know, I could walk through, I guess I will walk through one of the examples that we gave in the International Conference on Semantic Systems, the iSemantics conference, which was basically a migration use case. We were looking for migration data from across a bunch of different countries. So in this case, you know, basically I was saying I wanted to compile a map of migration data from the United States or all the major countries. And so the nice thing about this is I can use search terms and like migration and basically find all the data sets related to migration, but then I can actually facet on the United States. So I'm sure most of you have used a faceted browser before, so it's not, you know, the demo itself is not what's interesting, it's how to build it is what's more interesting to you guys. We're having a little bit of a performance issue today, I think, on IOGDS, so I'll get right into this BecoDemo search interface, which is being cut off. No, it's not. For BecoDemo, we had a couple different use cases which we thought a faceted browser really lent itself well to. And one of those use cases was basically find and plot data. I guess it was as the role of an NSF program manager. So he has a person that he's responsible for, or an award that he's responsible for, and so he wanted to find some data from a person named David Hutchins, and then from a particular award number. So, and also for a particular instrument. So he knows he was collecting bottle data. So I can start by typing Hutchins, and that constrains my search. You can see it's actually populating the map as we go. There's some, it looks like we have some data in that general region. Let's see. So there's a bottle, and there's the award number there. So it met all the use cases that we were hoping that it would, and then we can actually plot things. This is all, this right side of the application is all part of BecoDemo's work. They have spent a lot of time developing this map service, which uses some of their own, a combination of their own OGC services and open layers to be able to find and plot data. And I think it's a really interesting use case for S2S. So I can plot chlorophyll by depth, basically, in this particular area. But what S2S provided for them was before they really only had the option to constrain their search by a very limited number of things. It was projects, programs, and deployments, which we actually still have programs and projects. But now, one of the things they weren't able to do before was to scale search by person or search by instrument category or instruments and all these things. So this is what we provided with the S2S search. One of the other interesting things that I just wanted to demo quickly was, because mostly what you've seen at this point are facets that look kind of like this. S2S basically has a very configurable user interface. We've developed this hierarchical search widget, so this basically covers the entire VSTO instrument categories, or the instrument catalog, and so it you know, shows the actual RDF hierarchy for those instruments. And that was basically it for that, for the demo. Is there any questions on the demo or anything you want to see in particular? Probably not. Okay. I'm not going to get into the details on the architecture because, like I said, I want to spend a lot of time on the actual practical sessions of how things are developed. But there's a piece missing here, and that's the UI part that I showed you before, where the web developer was responsible for contributing UI pieces. But this just kind of shows how the innards of the S2S server looks. But yeah, I'm gonna skip over that unless you have any specific questions later. I'll come back to this slide. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about today was basically how do you build an S2S compatible web service. And this is one of the first steps that other people have to take. And generally I work with people pretty closely on setting these things up. So the first step basically is to identify what your facets are. For IOGDS, if we follow that as a real world example, we identified that the facets were countries, catalogs, agencies, categories, and a keyword. So that's pretty straightforward. But the second part after that is once you've identified these parameters, you have to create some metadata for them, because S2S has its own way of sort of dynamically constructing these interfaces and dynamically constructing web service queries. And you'll really see the purpose of these URIs that you're coining for these parameters later on. But for now, just basically think of this metadata as you need to attach a label to some particular parameter. So if we looked back at the IOGDS demo, you see a label over each of the facets, and that's basically where this comes from. It's as simple as that. One of the other things that you have to do when you create the metadata for your parameters is think about which of your parameters should be dynamic. What I mean by dynamic is if you make a selection or you constrain some particular facet, and I apologize, but I'm going to use parameters as opposed to facets because that's what we refer to facets as in S2S. So when you make a constraint on a particular parameter, which of your other parameters should be dynamic? So if we go back to this list, countries, catalogs, agencies, and categories are all dynamic parameters because they all get updated as you make constraints. So now that you've decided what your dynamic parameters are, the next step, step 3, is to create more metadata for particular query interfaces for each parameter. So what I mean by a query interface is basically just, it's a web service identifier. It says, call this web service to get those parameters that you're looking for. And the reason that this is needed is because S2S makes a separate asynchronous request to get the data for each parameter. And I'm really sorry, but definitely stop me